The generation that lived through what Stalin got up to is dying out. For the young who didn't, honest history matters. How much do they know about Stalin, the gravedigger of the revolution?
Stalin? Ah, Stalin.
The killings, the terror. Parents dragged from their children in the middle of the night, never to be seen again. How will these children react to the tyrant when he pops into their school?
I don't know whether these kids really know that much about Joseph Stalin. But anyway, it's obviously better than double maths. Have any of you ever heard any criticisms of Stalin?
I heard on TV that Stalin's statue should be removed from Gori as he killed many people.
Do you think that the statue should be taken down?
No!
He is a part of history and he belongs to Gori, so his statue should be there.
He was a great leader at that particular time.
This is Georgia, not Russia. But throughout the former Soviet Union, especially in the sticks away from the big cities, Stalin remains more popular than most mass murderers. What about the heartland of the old Soviet Union, Mother Russia? We're off to the city from which Joseph Stalin ruled with an iron fist for 3 decades, Moscow. Today, Russia's capital is a showpiece of 21st century uber-capitalism. The idea that a creepy old commissar in baggy trousers could be making a comeback here seems daft. Besides, officially Stalin's been out of favor for decades. After he died in 1953, he was denounced as a tyrant by the men who followed him in the Kremlin. Then, when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, Stalin's reputation was buried in concrete. This statue graveyard provides a final home to just 2 of the hundreds of stone Stalins that used to litter Moscow. Beside them, a monument to Stalin's victims. The trouble is, as they say in Russia, you never know what's going to happen yesterday. They're going back in time on the Moscow metro. Now its subterranean galleries are being restored to their old communist glory. Remember the old Soviet anthem that's been brought back? Well, half a century ago, the old words praising you-know-who used to decorate the ticket hall of this station. When Stalin was denounced, they were removed, but the station's just been restored to all its former glory. And guess who's made a comeback? The writing says Stalin brought us up and inspired us to carry out heroic deeds. At least as far as the Moscow underground is concerned, Stalin's back. Some Russians will be only too delighted that the clock is being turned back. Last year, a poll for a TV show was about to name Stalin as the greatest Russian ever, until, they say, the poll got nobbled. The program makers say that the Stalinists had tried to rig the vote in favor of the big moustache. He still came third. Millions of Russians continue not to believe the #1 fact about Stalin, that he was a mass murderer. The latest poll asked Russians if they considered Stalin a criminal. Just over a third say yes, but a bigger number said no. Why would ordinary Russians have any time for a man like Stalin? Because Russians seem to like strong leaders. Stalin spilt seas of blood, but so too did other great leaders of Russia. Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great. Vladimir Pozner knew firsthand the strong men who ran the Soviet Union after Stalin, because he used to be a Soviet spin doctor. Though he now admits that back then he was spouting propaganda, he knows how the Kremlin works. Why do strong leaders appeal to Russians?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious if you look at Russian history. And you know, something like 90% of the population were slaves. They always lived in a society where there was no personal liberties. It was the czars, then it was the Bolsheviks, They're used to that. This is something the West doesn't understand. It took the West 200, 300, 400 years to become what it is today. But it wants Russia to go like that, and that's not fair. That really isn't fair. And I think to a certain extent, this nostalgia that you run into every now and then about Stalin is kind of like a reaction to, well, they keep yelling at us and pushing us around and telling us that we're this, that, and the other. Well, Stalin wouldn't have allowed that. It's that kind of a reaction.
But the Kremlin's critics say that Stalin isn't back just because he's popular amongst ordinary Russians. He's also getting a boost from today's strongman in the Kremlin, former president, now Prime Minister, Vladimir Putin.
One of the great sources of Putin's popularity is that he's been banging the nationalist drum, promoting a Russia that's self-confident, strong and proud. But here's the problem. How can you be proud of a country whose longest-serving leader in the last century was a mass-murdering tyrant? It doesn't play very well, does it?
The solution? Play down Stalin's bad bits and big up the great leader stuff. And the place to start is the classroom. 2 years ago, Vladimir Putin made a speech slamming into the way Russian history was taught in schools. And everybody took notes. Putin went on, as to some problematic pages in our history, yes, we've had them, but what state hasn't? And we've had fewer of such pages than some others. Putin told the teachers that Russia couldn't allow itself to be saddled with guilt. They call this positive history. It sounds like something out of George Orwell's 1984, but it's got state power and money behind it. A few weeks after Putin's speech to the teachers, the Russian parliament passed a law giving the state power to officially approve some textbooks and dump others. What people are saying is that the new generation of official textbooks are far too soft on Stalin. And what's more, it's getting harder to get hold of the textbooks critical of the great dictator. First, I went to buy the latest approved textbook.
This is the positive history book.
A few years ago, they wrote textbooks that were much tougher on Stalin. You can still buy them, but schools can't get public money for them.
Okay. So let's just go here.
To find one, I have to go to the street corner traders who work Moscow's second-hand book market. The old book's author, very much out of favour, is this man, Igor Dalutsky.
Thank you very much. Mr. Putin has talked about the need for Russia to have good, strong, positive, patriotic history. Do you think that's a good idea?
No, that's an appalling idea which hinders proper teaching in schools. School history shouldn't create patriots. It should teach children to think, look for their own answers and their own explanations. In my textbook, Stalin is a criminal who committed crimes in his own country against his own people. He carried out the same policy towards the Baltic states as Hitler did against the Jews. Stalin was a criminal. I don't see any redeeming features in him.
The charge that textbooks gradually replacing those like Dalutsky's are airbrushing Joseph Stalin. And that's another blast from the past, because Stalin was a master of airbrushing history himself. At its most crass, it involved removing someone who'd fallen from grace. Now you see the man on the right, Stalin's secret police chief, Yezhov. Now you don't. Later, Yezhov was shot. But there's a smarter, more insidious form of airbrushing, by subtly changing an image. Stalin had a pockmarked face, which the airbrushes smoothed out. Critics of the Kremlin claim that it's carrying on touching up Stalin's image today.
I'm Mr. Filipov. Hello, hi.
Now that's a serious charge. So how do those who support positive history answer it? The author of the new approved textbook is this man, Alexander Filipov.
Critics say that in your history book, you've pretty much airbrushed Stalin. Do you think that's fair?
First of all, I don't believe that it's possible to justify what Stalin did. The very question of justifying Stalin's crimes seems absurd to me. There can be no moral justification for that.
That sounds rather negative for the positive history man. But if you can't justify Stalin's crimes, what's the point of positive history in the first place?
It's wrong to write a textbook that will fill the children learning from it with horror and disgust about their past and their people. And it's why we need to have a generally positive tone for the teaching of history in middle school, which will build optimism and self-assurance in our young people and make them feel as if they can play their part in the bright future of this country.
К судьбе своей страны.